Good evening. Welcome to St. Peter's in Hove. I'm Father Alexander. It's cold here. The boiler's off again. Chose its time, didn't it? Well, never mind the boiler. Think rather of our 107th step in our walking tour through the Bible and what happens to the people of Israel, the northern kingdom, at the beginning of chapter 17 of the first book of the Kings. Elijah the Tishbite said to Ahab, "By the life of the Lord God of Israel, whom I serve, there'll be neither dew nor rain these coming years unless I give the word." So Elijah announces that there's going to be a complete cessation of rain. In other words, there's going to be a famine. Nothing will grow, people will starve to death, and off he goes. Because the word of the Lord comes to him and says, "Go from here quickly, go east and hide by the torrent of Cherith, east of the Jordan. You can drink from the stream, and I've ordered the ravens to bring you food there." So off he goes into the middle of nowhere where there is this torrent, this brook, and he drinks from the brook, and the ravens bring him titbits to eat and say he's okay. He's living in the middle of nowhere. Presumably, he has to go there to get away from Ahab, who would be extremely cross with him if he could lay his hands on him. Then, of course, the stream dries up because there's no rain, and the birds stop coming because presumably they've all died of drought as well. So what he does, but after a little time, we're told the stream dried up. So what he does is he sets off rather to Zarepta town in Sidon, where he meets this widow who is also facing death, along with the entire population. She's got a small supply of grain in a jar. She's got a tiny amount of oil. She's going to cook these, and then she and her son will have their very last meal. And then they will look forward to dying because they've come to the end of their food supply. Now, this, of course, is a rather horrible thought. We here in Britain, we never have this problem. You know, sometimes we go to the shops and there are shortages thanks to supply chain issues. But the truth of the matter is, you don't starve in Britain. There may be people who eat unhealthy food, but most people have a full stomach. There are also people who can't afford to eat nice food, but they do eat food. And indeed, there are food banks for people who are unable to find, who don't have the resources to go to shopping as much as they would like. There are food banks. This widow, of course, she's already a widow, you understand, so she's got no support. And now she is a widow facing starvation and death. She is the most unfortunate of creatures. And he says to her, "Give me something to eat." Now, if you were looking for something to eat, you wouldn't approach a poor widow with a son who's on her last meal. But of course, he's directed by the Lord, and the widow looks at him, and she must wonder why the prophet, the man of God, is asking her for something to eat. He's a foreigner, don't forget. He's a Jew. He's an Israelite. She's a pagan. She's a Sidonian. In fact, she's one of the very worst sort of people because she's a worshipper of, we assume, of Baal. In fact, the people who've essentially driven Elijah out of Israel. So it's most unlikely that this is the right person to go to. And yet, of course, she says, "As the Lord your God lives," she's heard of the living God, "I have no baked bread," she said, "but nevertheless, we're about to die." He said, "Do not be afraid. Go and do as I have said. Go and do as you have said. But first of all, bring me something." Because he promises her this miracle that the supply of wheat will not dry up and the supply of oil will not dry up. So she went and did as Elijah told her. They had something to eat. And sure enough, the food supply didn't dry up. It was a miraculous, if you like, multiplication of the loaves, a bit like you get with our blessed Lord in the New Testament. So somehow or another, this woman's faith, she has faith in Elijah, and her faith is rewarded. But why should she have faith in Elijah? It's most astonishing that she has faith in Elijah, considering she's not Jewish, considering she's never met him before now. She knows nothing about him. But there's obviously she's a good woman, and she trusts in the Lord, even though she's not a believer, or she's not a true believer. She is an existential believer, I think, but she's not outwardly a believer. She believes in the Lord, she trusts in the Lord, but she does not outwardly conform to the religion of Israel. This, I think, is telling us something very important, this whole episode of the widow. It's telling us that we are invited, all of us, to trust in God. And if we make that leap of faith, we will be rewarded. Right now, in Britain, today is the 16th of December, 2021. We're living through a difficult time, and a lot of people are giving way to despair. I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but quite a lot of people have actually despaired and, most unfortunately, have killed themselves. I've met lots of people who have lost somebody who has committed suicide because the more lack of hope is spread in society, clearly it is going to have an effect on those most vulnerable, those who are already teetering on the brink of despair, and push them over into total despair. When you're in total despair, suicide is what happens. So the widow has not yet committed suicide but she's facing death, but she hasn't despaired. She obviously has some sort of hope. And this hope, coupled with charity, she sees Elijah as a human being in need. Therefore, he's walked all that way from the territory on the far side of the Jordan into what is now modern-day Lebanon. She feels sorry for him. Hope, charity leads to faith. Without hope, there won't be any charity, and without charity, there won't be any faith. And of course, hope, faith, and charity lead to this reward, which is God saving their lives, God taking pity on them. So I think it's very important that we have hope, and hope is, if you like, the foundational virtue. It's the first virtue. It's the first step that makes the path open to charity and to faith. Or maybe charity comes first. Charity gives her hope, and hope gives her faith. Anyway, then what happens is the widow's son dies. Most unfortunate. It happened after this that the son of the mistress of the house fell sick. His illness was so severe that in the end he expired. Poor boy. Don't know how old his son is. And the woman said to Elijah, "What quarrel have you with me, man of God? Have you come here to bring my sins home and kill my son?" So she reproaches Elijah. Why? Why has this happened? Have I been punished for my sins? What is it? Did you come here particularly to kill my son? Is your presence of the man of God, the man of the one true God, the God of Israel, is that the fact that I'm not Jewish? Is it God's way of rebuking me? Is the death of my son a rebuke from God? You see, she does believe. She does believe in the God of Israel. She does know that the God of Israel is the one true God, though she doesn't actually follow the God of Israel because she's not actually an Israelite. The clergy, the man of God, the prophet, and every priest, ordained priest, is meant to be a prophet as well, as indeed are all the baptized. The prophet is an object of reproach quite clearly in this passage. He is reproached by the woman. But the prophet, without having said anything, reproaches the unbelief or the seeming unbelief, or challenges the unbelief of the woman. And challenges, saying, the God of Israel is asking something of you. What is it that the God of Israel is asking of me? Now, most people want to be comfortable. Most people don't want to have to face the possibility that they have to change. And yet Elijah's presence is a challenge to the woman, and clearly a dramatic challenge to the woman. Her son has just died. It's asking her to change. "Give me your son," he said, and taking him from her lap, he's probably quite a small boy, he carried him to the upper room where he was staying and laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, do you mean to bring grief even to the widow who is looking after me by killing her son?" So even Elijah is challenging God. The woman challenges Elijah. Elijah challenges God. God is a challenge to us, or so he should be. He stretched himself on the child 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, may the soul of this child, I beg, come into him again." Some people reading this have said Elijah is doing some form of resuscitation on the child. He's doing sort of mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, or banging his chest, that defibrillation or whatever it's called. The Lord heard Elijah's prayer, and the child's soul came back into his body, and he revived. It's a miracle. I'm not quite sure medically what is going on here. Elijah took the child, brought him down from the upper room of the house, and gave him to his mother. Look, that phrase also comes up when Jesus raises from the dead the son of the widow of Nain. Look, Elijah, your son is alive. And the woman replied, now I know you are a man of God, and the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth itself. The woman makes a confession of faith. Whether she actually becomes Jewish in the formal sense, I don't know. But clearly, she's on a faith journey, as they say nowadays, isn't she? We're all on a faith journey. If we have a setback, like facing starvation, your son dying, that is a stepping stone of growth, for growth in the Lord. I'm not sure if the COVID pandemic is going to create more faith in our land. I really wish it would. I really think it should. Whether it will or not, I'm not sure. But it certainly should. It is a challenge to us. You know, life was comfortable before the COVID epidemic. Life is going to be very hard even when the epidemic is over. The economy is tanking, inflation is taking off, and we've lost our faith, I think, to a large extent, in the capacity of our government to govern. So these are challenges to us. And when we are challenged in this way, what should we do? We should have faith in God. And that's what the widow does. So Elijah is a great prophet. He rebukes Ahab and tells him, no rain till I say so, because of his lack of faith. And then he leads the widow to faith. But before the widow comes to faith, remember, she has hope. She comes to charity. Hope that helps. That's chapter 17 of the first book of the Kings. All the best then. Bye.